Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for being here today. Thank you to our panelists for joining us this morning. I want to say at the outset that it felt weird preparing for this panel today because I think we have such a range of views, of art styles, experiences that I didn't want to oversteer things. So while normally the Q&A is given like the last 15 minutes or so, I really want to encourage audience participation today. You might be here just to hang back and just to listen, and I respect that. I'm glad that you're here. But I wouldn't mind giving a little extra time to Q&A and to discussion between the panelists so we can have something semi-organic arise from today's talk. So the only formal part of the panel that I would like to do is give a nice introduction to our panelists to the best of my ability, starting with Sophie Margolin. Did I do it? Yeah. Okay, good, thank you. Sophie is an artist born and raised in Houston, Texas. She graduated from the School of Visual Arts in 2019 and now lives in Berkeley, California. Her art is mainly a therapeutic outlet for painful emotions. Sophie uses comics to bring these experiences out of her head, to attempt to understand herself better, and to hopefully reach other people who are going through similar things. She has self-published 3 zines: Diary, My Escape, and Whole Girl. Please, everyone, welcome Sophie. We're going to clap 3 more times. Here we go. Next up is Andy Lindquist. Andy Lindquist is a cartoonist and bookseller who lives between 2 rivers in Vermont. He makes comics about trans people, emotionally unavailable hunks, and Tracy Chapman's fast car. His latest comic, No Thing, was published this past summer by Paper Rocket Mini Comics as part of their mini memoir series. You can find him on Instagram at Quinslisting. Quinslisting? Yeah. Good. Or quinslisting@gmail.com. Everybody say hi to Andy. Next, Babs New is a cartoonist and professional art model. Their comic and recent gallery show in Washington, D.C., I'm a Work of Art, explores their journey with body issues and nude figure modeling. The companion series, Body Issues, Comics About Body Image, illustrates dozens of stories submitted by real people about their own experiences with body image and is a 2-time Mice Mini Grant winner. I'm going to interrupt my introduction. Is it now 3-time or is it 2-time? Okay, this makes 2. Okay. Well, next year. Okay. Where were we? Besides their comics focusing on body image, Babs also writes and draws children's comics. Their first graphic novel, Billy Johnson and His Duck Are Explorers, was released with Capstone Publishing in 2020. If you don't mind seeing their butt, you can follow Babs on Instagram and Blue Sky at Nude Model, that's N-E-W-D, Nude Model, like their last name. Say hi to Babs. Okay, Sig gave me the most challenging introduction. Here we go. Sig Burwash is a visual artist who works primarily in drawing, painting, and sculpture. They grew up in the mountain town of Kelluit, Rossland, in so-called Canada. It says it, so-called Canada. After completing a fine arts degree at the University of British Columbia, Okanagan, Burwash moved to the East Coast, Mikagi. They have traveled internationally for artist residencies that include Wonder Valley Experimental Living Cabin Project and AZ West, that's in Wonder Valley, California, Villalina Foundation Residency in Pisa, Italy, and the Banff Center in Banff, Alberta. Burwash's paintings and sculptures have been exhibited across North America and Europe. Their work is in the permanent collections of the Canadian Council for the Arts Art Bank, Nova Scotia Art Bank, Yukon Tourism and Culture, and UBCO. They now live in Unamaki, Cape Breton Island. Say hello to Sig. See, it's working. I got it. We're happening. So, as I said at the outset, there are so many ways into this discussion today. And I think the place I might want to start, just in general, to our panelists, is in their own life experiences before ink hits the page. To what degree in your own lives do you feel that yourself, your personhood, your essence, your soul, your nafs, all the different words we could use, to what degree your identity is your body? And then if you want to elaborate that on how that is reflected or not in your art, I would welcome that. Anyone want to tackle that big one first? Think about it. Yeah, my God. We'll talk about Mice's sponsors while they work on that. No, have you encountered thinking about that before? To what degree you are you, and to what degree your flesh is or isn't?
Well, I mean, I'm hyper specific to this question because my job is to literally present my body, and so there I am. Oh, good, you can see my little tattoo.
Yeah.
That's real.
Yeah.
So, I've been drawn, thousands of times, and I have an Instagram and stuff that I post the drawings people do of me. And at this point, even within, indie cartooning, since I've been modeling at a lot of indie conventions for figure drawing workshops,
okay,
I think my body is fully, my work and my body are completely entwined at this point. But maybe not in the way that you're talking about. I'm not sure, but
okay.
It's I draw myself as a little bird normally, so it's not like I really show my body that much in my own work. But in terms of my cartooning career, at this point, art modeling and cartooning are pretty much the same thing. So,
All right. Yeah, please.
I have an answer. Oh, okay, this works. When you first asked the question, I was about to say, "Oh no, definitely not." My identity is not my body. But I thought about it for a few seconds. Then I realized, I think it's definitely tied to identity, inextricably. But the way I see it is that my body is like a shell that houses my identity, and I think in my comics I've dealt with it in the way that I want to deal with my emotions by doing something to my body, by either getting rid of it or showing that there's a hole in it or disappearing completely, and maybe that would fix something. So yeah, I think my identity is tied to my body, but it's not exactly it.
Sure, yeah, that makes a great deal of sense. Andy or Sig, do you want to comment on this aspect or let it go by?
Yeah, I just need kind of a moment to think. But I think when I'm working with my memoir comics, I have two, No Thing and a comic called What You Owe and What You Own, which is about my experience as a classical vocalist when I was a teenager, and how gender inevitably was very tied up with that. And I think for a lot of my life, I felt very disembodied from my body. I'm not a person who easily connects with how they're feeling physically. And so I think I try to kind of process that a lot in my art and my memoir. I think trying to kind of write it on the page and visualize it has been very helpful. And also, I think when I'm writing like my comic strips or fiction, I often write, I write from the perspective of myself as a trans person, and I think so much of being trans is kind of dealing with people's perception of you, of your body, and how they link that to you and your own perception of yourself. And there's always kind of a weird dance. I think that happens with that. That at least I do as a trans person sometimes. So yeah, the body is very central to that.
Yeah, very fair.
Yeah, I think I find them hard to separate body and identity as much as, I think we often feel separated from our bodies, but maybe I'm most at home in my identity when I feel embodied, and I think my graphic novel, Vera Bushwhack, is very much exploring what it's like to be embodied when you are alone or alone in nature, and when an outside gaze is kind of removed, and how that relationship changed to your body when you're kind of one, like being physical, and also kind of removed from a gaze, and the way that a gaze really impacts our relationship to our body and identity. Yeah.
And when it comes to, the one thing you all have in common is you are comics illustrators, among many other identities. And you have, I guess we'd call it an opportunity to present a character, to present a representation of yourself that, while it might be looked at by audiences, and you probably want it to be, is anyone creating their art exclusively for themselves? Actually, I shouldn't make that assumption. Okay. So assuming that it is going to be seen by some audience, there is a useful disconnect created, that the gaze is not directly upon you, but upon your representation, or representation of characters that are semi-autobiographical in some degree. When I have spoken with other artists, particularly autobiographical comics creators, about the process they go through in determining what will represent them, whether it is, whether it looks like them, whether it's a bird, whether it's very cartoony, whether it's photorealistic. Could you talk about your process in either self-representation, deciding what a character of you will look like, or what of yourself shines through in the characters that you create?
For myself, my graphic novel, Vera Bushwhack, is semi-autobiographical, and in a lot of ways, like, for photo reference, using myself, being able to take photos of myself or look at myself in the mirror, what have you, was like the easiest way to, I was the easiest reference material. So in some ways my character does, mirror the way I look to some degree, but then throughout my comic, the character takes lots of different forms. So
Were you the photo reference for both Bushwhack and Drew?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
No, I don't know. Bushwhack is the more cowboy-like character. I had to access some more muscular reference material for that. I think what's so fun about comics is that you can represent yourself or the character, what have you, in whatever way that you want. And so I was exploring how to represent this character in a multitude of different ways and expressions that were imaginative and realistic, and kind of playing with the medium in that way.
Thank you.
Thinking about how you said with your work that how your body identity and your work was being like removed from the gaze. Mine is like kind of the opposite, where like a lot of my identity is through other people's representations of me.
Yeah.
So drawing myself as a baby bird isn't necessarily because like I'm uncomfortable of like a more realistic representation of myself. I mean, that is what I feel like, that little guy, a little fragile baby bird. But I do find it easier to like talk about things through the little baby bird. Like talking is way more difficult for me, like being articulate and like I said, I've been posing at a lot of conventions and like getting naked for like my industry peers. I'm not nearly as nervous as right now as doing this panel and talking in front of all you people.
Everybody is smiling under their masks.
Okay,
Everybody is giving you
No, I can see your
happy,
brows.
loving eyes right now. Nice gaze. Gaze.
So when I draw myself as a baby bird, it's more of like to help me process the ideas more than my body. And then also I feel like sometimes, since talking about your body can be a pretty like sensitive issue for even like the reader,
Yeah.
I think having a little cute character saying these things might be easier to like break down and talk about. So both for me and the audience maybe.
Yeah, very good.
So for No Thing, and also for my other memoir comic, they both happened when I was a teenager before I transitioned. So for a little while, I think when I started drawing those, it felt a little weird. It felt very vulnerable for me. Like, I mean, I'd have like public pictures online of myself. I'm not like that well known or anything, so people aren't like digging them up to be like, look at you. But I don't know. I think it was a really great opportunity actually for me. It made me kind of look at myself differently. One of the main goals for myself when I was making No Thing is that I wanted to describe the experience of like dysphoria, like especially around like sex, in terms that I would have used at the time. I kind of wanted to, I don't know, not validate myself then, but kind of explore what that looks like, and what ways I was expressing myself. And I think what was especially really great was the scenes where I draw myself as I imagine I might have looked like as a teenage boy. Yeah,
Is
right
that
there.
is that, yeah.
Yeah, and that was great. If I have any advice for you, it's to draw yourself kissing your middle school crush. Felt incredible. I was like, this never happened, but now it's happened in my comics. So yeah.
That's great. That's great. And Sophie, I know you also, just to add slightly to this, you also explore visual metaphors through the body. So I don't know if you want to connect to that.
Yeah, that's like my favorite thing to do, is to try to make an experience or an emotion into like some kind of like physical body, like image of the body doing something, or like being affected or like wounded, or I don't know. Yeah, okay, that's a weird.
Sorry, would this be?
Yeah,
you
like
prefer
that.
This one? Yeah, that's fine.
That was.
I'm really trying not to exert editorial input here.
No,
Go with.
that was good that you show that. But like in this, I'm like imagining how I would feel safe, and I imagine myself becoming like this baby creature, like no adult features, no scars, no like identifying features whatsoever, and that's how I would feel like the safest and the calmest. So that and like other things, like sometimes I draw myself as like a creature, like a goblin or something with like nails and big ears and a giant nose and things like that. I don't think I put any image of, but that one is like how I feel like I'm controlled by my heart and like my nerves and stuff. I feel like a fragile kind of creature under the microscope, or like as if it's only existing on a circulatory system. So yeah, like there are just so many like corny metaphors that I like to use to describe how I feel. And that's how I represent my body, I guess.
I don't think they're corny at all. I think metaphors are there for our use.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to do my job as a professor and bring in some theory and just bounce this off of you, see how you feel about it. I'm particularly looking at... There's no grade here, I promise, there's no grade. I'm looking at a book called Comics in the Body, Drawing, Reading, and Vulnerability by Esther Sezep. She says that focusing on graphic autobiography and reportage, the bodily performance of creators and readers produce a dialogue that requires both parties to experience and engage vulnerability, thus presenting a crucial opportunity for ethical encounters between artist and reader. I will summarize that slightly, which is to say that comics as a medium, unlike unique as a medium, provide an opportunity to engage in vulnerability, the artist's vulnerability, the reader's vulnerability, in a way that other media might not. You can passively watch a film. The director's fingerprints may or may not appear on a film. I'll shift the question in more grounded terms here. When you're creating art either about your body or in relationship to your body or semi-autobiographically attached to your body, do you experience a sense of empowerment, a sense of vulnerability and fragility, or does it shift? Does it ebb and flow between those feelings?
You're asking when we depict?
Yes, yeah. When you're putting pen to paper and you're drawing either yourself or something that semi-represents you in some fashion, do you feel particularly vulnerable, or do you feel more on a spectrum closer to empowered?
I don't know if this is like a common experience, but for me, I feel like both super vulnerable and like it's just like a need, like an absolute necessity. Like I need to draw myself feeling these things, or else I'll be like, I don't know, I'll be invisible and I'll be powerless. So it's like, I feel like I don't even have a choice, you know?
Yeah.
Like I have to draw myself and make people understand.
Yeah.
That's it, yeah.
Yes, very good. That does sound like a vulnerable process. Yeah. Babs?
So I would feel vulnerable talking about the stuff that's in like my comics about my body issues. And I imagine a lot of the people who submitted stories to my project felt vulnerable submitting a story.
Just bringing it back.
Oh yeah, there's a story from someone. But like once I've made it into a comic and posted it, like I don't feel vulnerable people reading my thoughts about my body once it's in a comic versus the way I'd feel of like somebody wanted to have a one-on-one conversation with me about how do I feel about my body. And I also, my hope, and like they're very vulnerable stories, and I kind of hope that the presentation of them like people might feel vulnerable maybe reading the Body Issues project, but I feel like a lot of people don't feel vulnerable reading it, I think because of the presentation. Because I don't really want people to, I wanted more of a cathartic feeling than a vulnerability reading it.
And your comic may be making a space for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think people are probably vulnerable. I know from people that it's vulnerable to submit a story to it, but I have been told that it's like when they see the final comic that it's very like, I guess empowering for them to like see it as the finished comic.
Andy, I think you suggested I think there must be some empowerment to drawing yourself with your middle school crush, but more generally, where would you fall along that spectrum?
That's a great question. I think like my work also deals a lot with sex. Not like directly necessarily, but I feel like I'm often kind of thinking about like the body and how people use their bodies in relationships. And in my comic no thing, I detail the process of Googling how to masturbate and trying to do that and not really being successful because of dysphoria. And that's something that it felt like good to take ownership of that in a way. I think I was very nervous when I was like pitching this comic and drawing it because I you know when you're a child, if you have that experience where you draw kind of a saucy picture and you're like, I'm going to go to child jail. Like I feel like they're going to be like, you drew a teen having a sexual feeling, you're going to real adult jail where we send perverts. So I think like that, I think like the idea of being perceived in that way and kind of being taken in bad faith was very vulnerable, but the process of drawing it felt empowering. Yeah.
Sig, do you want to make any comment on this, or?
For myself, I think putting words on the page is what feels vulnerable, and the drawing and drawing the body doesn't so much.
Okay.
I feel like maybe the body just becomes lines on the page amongst other lines, and there's something there that feels comfortable.
Okay.
But I would say it's more the words on the page as a visual person that feels the most vulnerable.
As a visual person, right. No, that makes a great deal of sense. I do want to offer just sort of one more discussion point and then open it up more widely to the audience. I think the panel is about bodies writ large, right? But I mean, we could talk about all different configurations of bodies, gendered bodies, handicapped or different bodies of different ability, bodies of different sizes, ethnicities, and so forth. So I do want to just enter into the conversation here a few other approaches to bodiliness in comics. Dealing with bulimia and dealing with eating disorders, such as in Lighter Than My Shadow by Katie Green, dealing with coming to love your body, respect your body at whatever size it may be. This is Full of Myself by Siobhan Gallagher. And then accepting body either in terms of health or just body neutrality, just accepting that we are these meat sacks, every single one of us, and are getting through this experience as best we can. So that does not conclude the panel. That shifts the panel now to any questions either the panelists would like to pose to each other or questions from the audience. Does anyone have a hot take they'd like to offer or ask the panel? Yeah, in the back there.
I have, okay. I know that when talking about like bodies and sex in particular, there's a lot of censorship and judgment, especially in more traditional publishing spaces. And I'd love to hear about your experiences with censorship, either coming from the outside or dealing with self-censorship based on like fear of judgments and stuff like that, and how you either, you know, respect that self-censorship or challenge the self-censorship. Yeah.
The only censorship I have to deal with, because all my body issues and art modeling comics are self-published, is via Instagram's problem with my work and my body. I'm flagged a lot. Like my account is, I can't appear in, I can't collab with people. I can't appear in like the explore tag or reels or hashtags. So I'm like pretty censored by my main social media. But like, I don't have to really deal with censorship in terms of like publishing, and my comics themselves don't really get censored on. They got censored on TikTok, but they don't get censored on Instagram. But if I post any sort of like art modeling stuff, like my drawings usually squeeze by, as long as the painting's not too realistic. But if I post anything from like a class I've done, it's a pretty good chance that Instagram's gonna come for me.
I have to ask, just out of curiosity, Blue Sky.
Blue Sky is nice because you can like tag like the type of like content, but they still keep like labeling stuff as sexual, and like nothing against pornography, but there's a difference between pornography and what I'm posting.
Sure.
And I think that just also leads to, I get reblogged sometimes by accounts from like, that's not what I was posting that for. And I think the fact that Blue Sky labels it that is definitely helping them be like, oh, maybe this was supposed to be sexual. And it's,
Okay.
I don't like being sexualized by all these social media companies, to be honest.
Anyone else encounter either censorship or self-censorship? Yeah, Sophie.
Yeah, I mean, for my comic Whole Girl, it includes like a very weird sexual scene. Yeah, I mean, might as well. Yeah, it's like this hammerhead guy. She meets him, and then something ensues. And I self-censored because I've never posted anything like that before on my Instagram. I was really afraid that I would get like banned or something. It's not even that bad though. So I put it on Gumroad behind like a paywall because I was like, God, I don't want to take any chances of people like thinking I'm weird or whatever. Because I also self-censor because I think I grew up in a very prudish household. So I think of sex and anything relating to it as like a very, very shameful thing. Sure. So even though like, you know, I want to draw stuff like that, but I censor myself as just like an anxiety thing. So yeah, I don't know.
And you wouldn't be the first artist to ever do that, obviously. That's
Right.
That's a very common experience.
Yeah, I mean, I'm mostly self-published. No Thing is the first comic I've had published by somebody other than me. So a lot of it is dealing with self-censorship, and a lot of that is also like I haven't posted like most of my comics online. I think I am a little avoidant of that. But and I did struggle with self-censorship. I mean, I talked about No Thing, and that was more of a also. I wanted it to be like deemed appropriate for like teenagers to read. And I said in my thumbnails, I was like, I'm biting my nails for Robin to be like, you can't have that in there. And she was like, it's fine. So shout out to her. But I think I used to worry a lot more. I have a comic that I made called Who Lays the Layman, which is a comic about a trans man who hooks up with superheroes. And when I had that at my graduation ceremony, I graduated from CCS, and my dad read it. And you know, once your dad has read your gay sex comic, like it's like, where else is there to be ashamed of, you know? Like, I've seen the face of death, and I have not flinched, so bring it on, I guess.
I kind of felt similar to you with your dad reading it, as my high school art teacher walked into an open session I was posing at.
Oh.
And I was like, okay, well, now that he's been here, I don't think I'm embarrassed by anyone seeing me like naked ever again.
That's so real.
I guess in my graphic novel, Vera Bushwhack, there's a masturbation scene where the character goes kind of into this like imagined fantasy realm. And initially when I drew that, I think there was a degree of self-censorship. It was like pretty mild, and the editor I was working with from Drawn and Quarterly really encouraged me to like let loose in that scene. I think they saw the character of Vera Bushwhack as someone like very out there, and they felt like that could extend into that scene more than I had, and so I redrew it and just kind of let myself. I drew it like I did a draft of it where I just thought, okay, this is probably not going to be what will go in the book, but I'll just like try to let my imagination run wild, and I did end up putting that draft, kind of develop that into the book, and that was great. That was like great to have someone to encourage me to not hold back in that moment.
That's wonderful to have a publisher's support and encouragement.
Yeah, totally.
Rather than them pulling back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
More questions from our delightful audience today. Yes, please. Got a microphone coming your way.
A couple of you have touched on this already, but I just wanted to hear more about it. Do you all ever draw yourselves as like not human? And like, how does that sort of reflect what's going on inside of you? And just how do you feel about it?
That's an excellent question, I think, because the presumption with comics and body is human body, right? Is Homo sapiens, but there's nothing limiting you in comics to adhere to that. So that's a fantastic question.
Yeah, I love drawing myself as something that's slightly off of human. Like, I don't think I would draw myself as a dog or as a seal, but something that looks like almost human, but not quite. Something that would be like live on an isolated planet by itself and find itself on Earth one day and feel lost. Like, I don't think I put any examples of this up there, but like...
Yeah, I'm sort of looking for what might either this or...
something like that, or like a creature with green skin, yellow eyes, sharp feet. Yeah, I don't know if it's clear to people when they look at it, but like it kind of represents how I feel as a person in life, interacting with people and being aware of my shell. I would almost prefer to always exclusively represent myself as non-human, but you know, sometimes you have to draw yourself as a human. You know, it's fine.
I guess one of my examples, there's I guess in this one, it shows the character kind of morphing into a dog, which I think that's the only time in the book that the character really morphs into something non-human, but I play with kind of alter egos and imagination in my comic, and I like the idea of that this was more like the dog's imagination, where they're imagining the character like as them, kind of like flipping it. But yeah, I think along the lines of being embodied, I think trying to morphing into an animal or something that is like very embodied is a way to represent that, and
Yeah, you can
think of yourself in a more embodied way through an animal perspective.
Yeah, and you can be a squiggle. You can be an abstract shape. I mean, there's
Yeah.
the comics affords this unlimited representational space. Did either? Yeah,
Well, as we saw, I draw myself as a baby bird.
baby bird.
When I stream on Twitch, I'm also that baby bird instead of me. And even though like I feel pretty positive about my body, or at least like pretty neutral all the time, I still, if I'm honest, would like to be viewed as cute 100% of the time, always.
Sure.
And I feel like baby bird Babs lets me be 100% cute 100% of the time. So yeah, I feel like I'm baby bird Babs, but I would also like to be more like baby bird Babs, I guess.
Fair.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for a while I was drawing myself. There's a comic I drew, which is a sort of semi-autobiographical, where I drew myself having like a human form, but having like a cloud of smoke instead of head. And I think that was, I was kind of experimenting a little bit more with that in kind of like the early stages of like my comics and of transitioning as well. But I kind of feel a little bit more settled on my human form, like not to be like too serious about it, but I think it's pretty important to be seen as human right now. So, but it's fun.
Okay.
Drawing things that aren't
glad
human
we
are
wrapped
fun. Hot take.
Hot take.
Hot take.
As we address more questions for the audience, I'll also point out readers have an embodied state when reading comics. That can be digital or that can be in print, but you are engaging with the work not just through your eyes, but through swiping, moving, repositioning your body in a way that maybe music might not demand. Music has entirely its own powers and media strengths, but there is a bodiliness to the comics reader that we can maybe relate to the comics creator. Were there more questions from the floor? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry if this is a bit of a superficial question in some ways, but do you ever feel like, you are worried about other people thinking or you thinking that when you're creating a comic, you're trying to force yourself into a group where either you're not welcome or you don't belong? Personally, I often have kind of like a gut reaction when I'm reading like lesbian media and one or more of the characters is trans. I get kind of like I get spooked.
Okay, so I think there are two parts to that question. I think there's the first part, which is, do you ever feel that you might be entering a space with your representation that there's a friction or an uncertainty, any feeling of imposterism? But then there was a specific focus on the engagement in LGBTQ representation. So I don't know if we want to take either part of that.
I mean, in my work, I've barely ever talked about being non-binary. In real life, I came out as non-binary way later than I probably wanted because I was like, there's a certain threshold of non-binariness I haven't hit yet to call myself non-binary, which is ridiculous to think, but that's how I felt at the time. But there are people who've submitted stories to body issues who have talked about like they are wary of calling themselves fat or trans because similar feelings. It's like they're not trans enough, or that because they haven't faced like as much pressure from outside about being fat that like they can't claim like fat positivity because like they have other people have like been through worse because of being fat than them. I think that is a tension a lot of people experience, at least early on when they're exploring their identity more for the first time.
Yeah. Would anyone else like to address the question?
Yeah, I think that's also, I had a weird struggle with portraying my weight as well. Like when I was a teenager, I was much thinner than I am now, but it's always been something that's been a huge insecurity for me. It's been something that as a child, I was kind of like a fat little child. And that was something that was constantly talked about by the adults in my life. And I always, as a kid, I always was like, I'm going to draw myself thin and beautiful. But like, I obviously don't think that anymore. I think fat people are actually better looking. Another hot take. But yeah, so I was like I always get nervous with that, with people, like somebody's like gonna pick up my comic, be like, you're not fat enough, or you're too fat in this comic. That's a weird thing, a weird idea that people are gonna police you. Nobody actually knows what you look like in real life, unless you're watching this panel right now. So.
We have a few minutes remaining, and I can fill the time with any number of questions, but I certainly want to make space hold space for anyone. I'm sorry, I had to try that term out at least once. I don't know. Are there any other questions from the audience that we'd like to put towards the panelists? You are a very respectful group. Okay, so here's my question for the panelists. I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, that you are also comics and graphic novel consumers. Are there any artists, or more largely visual artists beyond the comics medium, that you look at in their representations of themselves or of bodiliness or of just human shape and think that they're doing something innovative, unique, impressive, pushing a boundary? Is there anyone you might like to highlight or turn the audience on to?
Definitely, but I'm completely blanking. So if any of you follow my Instagram, I'll post them in my stories later.
Okay, yeah, that's a good hook.
Same.
That's pretty good. To be continued on this answer, you must tune into social media. Is there anyone that comes to mind, or is that something that, or do you have your creator headsets on and not your receiver perspectives on? Because I got more questions.
Tommy Parrish comes to mind for me as someone.
Okay.
I was going to say Tommy Parrish, too.
There we go.
Fight.
Yeah, they often, kind of like a disproportionately small head and kind of a broad shoulder and bigger bone body in this way that, yeah, it was maybe just more like of this kind of subtle difference, but I think I was always really drawn to the way they represented bodies, and I don't know if I have too much to say about it. But
Okay, no, that's fair.
yeah.
One of my favorite artists is also one of my friends. Her name is Yasmin Abedifard, and she is an incredible artist. She just released a comic book called When to Pick a Pomegranate, and it's like mind-blowing the way she draws her relationship with like this entity that like is herself, but is also like an object of her desire, and like it desires her too. It's crazy. I'm so like amazed by her, and she's one of my biggest inspirations.
That was How to Pick a Pomegranate by Yasmin.
When to Pick a Pomegranate.
When to Pick a Pomegranate.
Yeah, it is amazing. You should.
And what's
check it out.
Yasmin's last name again?
Abedifard.
Okay.
Abedifard. Yeah.
It's not a spelling bee. It's okay.
No, yeah.
We're doing all right. Well,
This isn't a comic, but Kelly Bastow or Moose Kleenex on Instagram used to do these really, I thought, beautiful illustrations of like a bunch of different body types, and I always really liked those. That's what I was looking up on my phone. I was like, what's their Instagram? Moose Kleenex.
You are allowed to access your phone. We're all friends here. Well, as we conclude today, I think one more theorist creator that I could bring up is Creota Wilberg, who you may or may not be familiar with. Excellent creator. Put out a book from Uncivilized Books called Draw Stronger, Self-Care for Cartoonists and Visual Artists. I imagine there are other creators here with us in the audience today, but as comics creators, how do you care for your own bodies?
Well, first, Creota and I do a workshop every year at SPX for figure drawing. I love Creota. I haven't been drawing comics as much lately, so I haven't had to worry as much about. I mean, I do put my body in painful situations posing all the time, but that I get over it later. It's fine. If I were to get serious about drawing comics as often as I used to, I would be interested to see how much more my body is strained in my 30s versus my 20s when I was really drawing comics constantly. So at that point, I'll maybe look at her work again.
And this is just, you could be lower back strain from sitting too long, or carpal tunnel from the use of your wrist, or too much blue screen in your eyes. I'm just curious, are there ways that you address that or try
No.
to achieve No, okay.
Pain.
Pain for the art.
Yeah, actually, I did get Creato's book, and it has been helpful. So shout out. Thank you.
Shout out to Creota. Shout out to all of you for being with us here today. If there are no further questions, panelists, where and how can they best find you, either here at MICE or virtually?
My Instagram is just my name with a period between the names, so Sophie.Margolin at Instagram or whatever. Yeah, that's like my main site, so yeah, thank you.
Instagram is also the best way you can find me online. It's QUINDLISTING, because I love to make myself ungoogleable. I'm also at table 41B. Please come by and say hi. I would love to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm at 27A. Yeah, 27A. Like when you go into the big hall, I'm immediately on the right as soon as you walk in.
Great.
And my Instagram, Blue Sky is nude model, but NEW, like my last name. You can also follow Matthew New Comics if you want 1T, because my dad messed up on my birth certificate. But if you want to follow my comics and not see me naked all the time, you can follow that instead if you're worried about getting in trouble at work or whatever.
Yeah, my website and Instagram is just sigburwash.com or at sigburwash. And I'll be at table 67 today and tomorrow from 1:30 to 2:30.
Are you doing a signing there?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen and friends beyond the binary, one more time for our panelists, please. Thank you for being with us. Take care. Thank you all so much.